The Keth'var had perfected conquest the way some species perfected art or mathematics, with obsessive dedication and an almost insulting efficiency. For 3,000 cycles they had expanded their empire not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the considerably more economical method of scaring entire civilizations into submission before the first shot was fired. It was, admittedly, a brilliant strategy. Why waste resources on prolonged warfare when you could simply broadcast your most horrifying psychological profiles directly into a species' collective consciousness and watch them surrender within hours? The Keth'var had catalogued fear responses across 700 different sapient species, from the crystalline Vorthak, who trembled at the thought of sonic disruption, to the gas-dwelling Nexari, who would flee at the mere suggestion of atmospheric compression. Commander Zethka stood before the tactical display in the flagship's primary chamber, watching the blue-green world rotate slowly in the projection field. Earth, the scouts had designated it, third planet from a yellow star, teeming with what appeared to be a reasonably advanced carbon-based species, calling themselves humans. "Standard psychological profile completed, Commander," reported Tactical Coordinator Vexthru, her voice carrying the particular satisfaction that came from yet another routine conquest. "The dominant species exhibits typical mammalian fear responses: elevated cardiac function when threatened, adrenaline surges, fight-or-flight mechanisms. Should be a straightforward intimidation protocol." "Duration estimate?" Zethkus asked, though he already knew the answer. It was always the same. 6 to 8 standard time units for complete capitulation, assuming we begin with moderate terror broadcasts and escalate as needed. The bridge crew exchanged the kind of looks that suggested they were already planning shore leave. After all, what was there to discuss? The humans would receive their standard introduction to Keth'var psychological warfare, carefully crafted nightmares transmitted directly to their neural networks. Images of cosmic horror that had reduced mighty civilizations to quivering masses. And within hours, the surrender broadcasts would begin. "Initiate Phase 1, Zethkus commanded. The transmission arrays hummed to life, sending carefully calibrated terror frequencies toward the unsuspecting planet below. The Keth'var had refined this process to an art form. First, establish psychic contact with the dominant species' communication networks. Second, flood their primitive media systems with visions of incomprehensible cosmic dread. Third, wait for the inevitable collapse of social order as fear consumed their ability to think rationally. "Contact established," Vextu reported. "Their global communication network is remarkably primitive but surprisingly extensive. We've achieved complete penetration of their information systems." "Excellent. Begin terror broadcast sequence." What happened next would be discussed in Keth'var tactical academies for generations, though not for the reasons anyone expected. The first response came through the humans' own communication channels, crackling through the bridge speakers with surprising clarity. "Holy shit, did you guys see this? Someone's hacking every screen on the planet with some kind of cosmic horror movie." Zethkus blinked. This was not the usual screaming. "Commander," Vextu said slowly, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the surface. They appear to be discussing our psychological warfare broadcasts." "Discussing them how?" More voices filtered through the communication array. "The tentacle design is pretty derivative, honestly. Very Lovecraftian, but without the subtlety. I give it a 6 out of 10. Good production values, but the existential dread feels forced. Anyone else getting major Cthulhu vibes? This is like if cosmic horror had a bigger budget, but worse writing." The bridge fell silent, except for the continued chatter from Earth's surface. Zethgas stared at the communication console, as if it might suddenly make sense. "Coordinator Vextu," he said carefully. Please confirm that we successfully transmitted the seventh circle of absolute terror directly into their consciousness. Confirmed, Commander. Full psychological penetration achieved. They received the complete catalogue of cosmic dread, including the writhing darkness of eternal despair and the screaming void of infinite loss. More transmissions from the surface. Wait, there's more coming through. Oh, this is the screaming void bit, classic. My neighbor's kid is live streaming this. She's got 40,000 viewers and counting. Someone needs to get this on social media before it ends. Zethkus looked at his crew, who stared back with expressions that suggested they were experiencing their own existential crisis. Tactical coordinator, he said slowly, in your professional opinion, what exactly is happening down there? Vextu consulted her instruments with the desperate concentration of someone hoping technology might explain the inexplicable. Commander, she said finally, I believe they're enjoying it. High Admiral Krexmon had conquered 47 worlds without breaking a sweat, metaphorically speaking, since the Keth'var didn't actually perspire. He had reduced entire star systems to cowering submission through nothing more than targeted nightmares and the occasional dramatic fleet maneuver. So when his most experienced field commander requested an emergency strategic consultation over what should have been a routine planetary acquisition, his interest was decidedly piqued. Explain to me again how a pre-warp civilization managed to neutralize our psychological warfare, Krexmon said, settling his considerable bulk into the command throne aboard the dreadnought Whisper of Doom. Zethka stood at attention, though his usual military bearing seemed somewhat deflated. Admiral, they didn't neutralize it. They're treating it as recreational content. Recreational? Yes, sir. They've assigned numerical ratings to our terror sequences. The Infinite Screaming Maze received what they call 3.7 stars on their entertainment networks. The fleet psychologist Yithral raised one of her sensory stalks. That seems adequately terrifying? No, psychologist, their rating system apparently caps at 5. We achieved below average approval. Admiral Krexmon leaned forward, genuinely intrigued despite himself. Continue. Furthermore, Zethkus pulled up the tactical displays. They've begun creating what they term reaction videos to our psychological attacks. Individual humans record themselves experiencing our carefully crafted existential horrors and broadcast these recordings to others for amusement purposes. Yithral's eye stalks swiveled in confusion. They find terror amusing? Worse, they find our terror amateur. The Admiral consulted his tactical archives, scrolling through 3 millennia of successful conquests. The pattern had been beautifully consistent: broadcast fear, receive surrender, establish dominion, move to next target. Occasionally a species would resist initially, but they all eventually crumbled under sustained psychological pressure. What about escalation protocols? He asked. Have we tried the deep madness frequencies? Admiral, they created musical remixes. Silence stretched across the command deck like a particularly awkward dinner party. Strategic advisor Keth'var, a veteran of the conquest of the stubborn Rylac systems, cleared his throat. Equivalent? Perhaps we should examine precedent. The cephalopod collective of Kepler 4442 initially showed resistance to standard fear induction. The cephalopods lasted 6 days, Krexmon replied. They eventually submitted after we showed them visions of their offspring being consumed by stellar parasites. Well, yes, but the Silica monarchs of Tau Ceti held out for almost 3 weeks before the dissolution of reality protocols broke their resistance. Granted, Admiral, but these humans... Are you suggesting, the Admiral's voice carried the kind of ominous weight that had intimidated civilizations across the galaxy, that a collection of bipedal mammals with barely developed space travel capabilities represents a greater challenge than the combined might of the crystal hierarchies. Zethkus activated the communication relay. Perhaps the Admiral should hear their latest transmissions. The bridge speakers crackled to life with distinctly human voices. Okay, so the tentacle monsters are back, but this time they're doing this whole witness the end of hope thing. Honestly, the storytelling has improved. I'm getting serious Silent Hill vibes from this new sequence, very atmospheric. My 8-year-old daughter just asked if she can dress up as the Devourer of Souls for her school's costume day. Admiral Krexmon blinked several times. Their offspring want to emulate our instruments of terror? It gets worse, Admiral. They've begun creating their own versions. Apparently they have an entire entertainment industry dedicated to generating fear responses in themselves. Psychologist Yaithral consulted her instruments frantically. That's not how fear works. Fear is a survival mechanism. Species flee from threats, not seek them out for pleasure. According to our cultural analysis, Zethkus continued, humans regularly engage in activities specifically designed to trigger their own terror responses. They call them horror movies, haunted houses, and something called extreme sports, which appears to involve deliberately placing themselves in mortal danger for recreational purposes. The Admiral stared at the tactical display, watching Earth's peaceful rotation with growing unease. For the first time in his military career, he was beginning to understand why some species developed what humans might call anxiety disorders. "Recommendations?" he asked finally. "Full escalation, Admiral. Deploy the nightmare protocols. If they want entertainment, we'll give them genuine cosmic horror." The nightmare protocols had never failed. Not once in their entire documented history of galactic conquest. They represented the absolute pinnacle of Keth'var psychological warfare, reality-bending horror frequencies capable of driving entire populations into catatonic states within minutes. The technical specifications alone required 17 different warning labels and a psychological health waiver for the operator. Admiral Krexmon watched the deployment readouts with grim satisfaction. 12 dreadnoughts had moved into Earth's orbital space, their nightmare generators charging to maximum capacity. This wasn't going to be another amusing misunderstanding. This was going to be the kind of systematic psychological demolition that would serve as a case study for future military academies. "All vessels report ready, Admiral," came the coordinated response from the fleet. "Initiate Nightmare Protocol 7. Full spectrum psychological assault." The energy discharge was visible from orbit. Streams of pure, concentrated terror cascading down toward Earth's surface like malevolent aurora. Every human consciousness on the planet would simultaneously experience their deepest, most primal fears, amplified beyond the limits of sanity. The Keth'var had broken civilizations with a fraction of this firepower. The first response came through 47 seconds later. "Dude, they just upgraded the show. This is incredible." Krexmon's confidence wavered slightly. "All major cities reporting the same phenomenon, Admiral," Tactical Officer Mexthu announced. "They're broadcasting our psychological assault on what they call every streaming platform simultaneously." "Which means what, exactly?" "Near as we can determine, sir. It means the entire planet is watching." The communication feeds multiplied exponentially. This is definitely better than the first season, much higher production budget. The existential dread sequence just made my philosophy professor cry tears of joy. Anyone else notice they're using actual physics-breaking effects now? The budget on this must be insane. My grandmother wants to know if this is that virtual reality thing she keeps hearing about. Admiral Krexman felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of military service. Genuine confusion, mixed with what could generously be called professional embarrassment. "Status report on psychological impact," he demanded. "Admiral." Psychologist Yithral's voice carried the hollow tone of someone whose worldview was systematically collapsing. "Their fear response indicators are elevated?" "Excellent. Panic levels?" "No, sir. Their adrenaline production has increased, heart rates are elevated, and stress hormones are spiking, but they're not exhibiting standard fear-flight responses." "Then what are they doing?" "They appear to be having fun." The bridge fell quiet except for the continued stream of human commentary. "This reminds me of that time I went bungee jumping, except for my brain. My kids are taking notes. They want to build a haunted house based on the interdimensional horror sequence. I haven't felt this alive since I went skydiving." Commander Zethkus cleared his throat. "Admiral, we've identified several concerning patterns in their response behavior, such as they've organized viewing parties. Groups of humans are gathering specifically to experience our psychological warfare together. They're sharing snacks." "Snacks?" "Yes, sir. Also, their military forces have begun mobilizing, but not in a defensive pattern." Krexman leaned forward. "Finally, some conventional military response. Aggressive positioning?" "No, Admiral. They're setting up what appear to be camera equipment and concession stands." The tactical display showed Earth's major population centers, where instead of the expected chaos and breakdown of social order, organized crowds were gathering in public spaces. Military vehicles were indeed moving, but they seemed to be providing crowd control and technical support, rather than preparing for battle. "Admiral," Mexthu interrupted, "we're receiving a direct communication from Earth's surface. It appears to be from their governmental leadership." "Finally, surrender terms?" "Not exactly, sir. They're asking about merchandising rights." "They want to what?" "They'd like to license our psychological warfare content for what they call theme park applications. Apparently, they believe our terror sequences would make excellent additions to their recreational fear facilities." Admiral Krexman stared at the communication console, then at his staff, then back at the console. In 3,000 years of conquest, no one had ever asked to purchase their instruments of war for entertainment purposes. "Sir," Zethkus added quietly, "they're also requesting a meeting to discuss what they term collaboration opportunities." 6 months later, former Admiral Krexman found himself standing in what humans called a boardroom, wearing what they insisted was appropriate business attire, discussing quarterly profit margins. The irony was not lost on him that the species which had conquered half the galaxy through fear was now learning about market demographics and customer satisfaction surveys. "So the haunted starship experience pulled in 2.4 billion credits last quarter," explained Marketing Director Jennifer Liu, gesturing at holographic charts that would have made Keth'var tactical displays seem primitive. "The interdimensional horror maze is testing especially well with the 18 to 34 demographic." "What about the Nightmare Protocol immersion pods?" asked former Commander Zethkus, who now held the distinctly non-military title of Chief Experience Officer. "Booked solid through next year. We've got waiting lists on every continent. Turns out humans will pay premium prices to experience existential terror in controlled environments." Krexman still struggled with the concept. The Keth'var Empire, 3 millennia of galactic dominance built on psychological warfare, had become a subsidiary of something called Universal Entertainment Solutions. Their weapons of mass terror were now rides at theme parks. Their dreadnoughts had been converted into mobile horror experiences that traveled between star systems, providing what humans cheerfully called authentic cosmic dread tourism. The other conquered species are asking questions, reported former psychologist Keth'var, now director of interspecies relations. The cephalopod collective wants to know why they surrendered to us when they could have just charged admission instead. How are we handling that? Jennifer asked. They're offering them franchise opportunities. Turns out squid-based horror has a very dedicated niche market. The transformation hadn't been entirely smooth. The Keth'var military had experienced what humans tactfully called organizational restructuring. Half the fleet had defected to pursue careers in entertainment design, while the other half had joined human research programs studying what they termed recreational fear psychology. Several former admirals were now working as consultants for human horror movie studios, lending authenticity to cosmic horror productions. The Galactic Authority is requesting another meeting, Keth'var continued. Apparently, 17 more civilizations have declared independence this month. Let me guess, Keth'var said. They realized our empire was built on elaborate psychological theater rather than actual military superiority. Essentially, yes, though several of them have expressed interest in our business model. Jennifer nodded approvingly. Nothing wrong with healthy competition. The horror entertainment market is expanding faster than we can service it. The door chimed, and in walked someone Keth'var still found personally disturbing. Dr. Marcus Webb, former human military strategist, now their head of psychological warfare research and development. He carried the enthusiastic energy of someone who had found their true calling. Fantastic news, Marcus announced. The beta testing for Virtual Apocalypse 7 is exceeding expectations. We've managed to trigger genuine existential crisis responses while maintaining what focus groups describe as peak enjoyment levels. Any side effects? Keth'var asked. Some participants report lasting feelings of euphoria and improved stress management. Apparently, controlled exposure to cosmic horror builds psychological resilience. We might have accidentally created a therapeutic application. Keth'var reflected on this development with the philosophical resignation of someone whose worldview had been systematically disassembled and rebuilt. The Keth'var had spent millennia perfecting fear as a weapon, only to discover that their greatest enemy wasn't fearlessness at all. It was a species that had somehow evolved to find terror actively beneficial. Quarterly projections, he asked, because apparently this was his life now. Conservative estimates put us at 12 billion credits profit next quarter, Jennifer replied. The Halloween season alone should push us into the black for the entire fiscal year. Outside the conference room windows, Keth'var could see the latest addition to Earth's orbital infrastructure, the Dreadnought Haunted House, where paying customers lined up for hours to experience what was once the galaxy's most feared psychological weapon. Any regrets? Marcus asked, following his gaze. Keth'var considered this. The Keth'var Empire was gone, their military reputation in ruins, their weapons converted into tourist attractions. But somehow, they were making more profit from entertainment than they ever had from conquest. Just one, he said finally. We should have charged the other species admission from the beginning.